wondering what your game plan or your thoughts are. Several years ago, I had an opportunity to visit Washington, D.C. and meet with some congressmen and senators. And most of the congressmen and senators we were able to meet with and question one-on-one were not only conservative, but most of them were Christian politicians. And some of the questions were being asked at that time, and one of the questions I had specifically was, at that time the Republicans were in control. My question was, with you guys being in control of what's going on, why aren't you doing more? And one of the answers I was given by Senator Brownback from Kansas was, he was explaining and educating the fact that the way the system is set up, that there's certain times that people are in charge of different committees. So if there's an issue that comes up, it has to run through that committee. And even if the Republicans are in charge, if a Democrat is in charge of that committee, he can say that issue is not going to even be discussed. So we've got some issues there. The other issue, and they're kind of separate, but they were both in the forefront of my mind, is the fact that, and I kind of mentioned it Thursday at the Tea Party, and I'm really kind of ticked off about it. I've become aware more recently that when we're talking about how can we have an effect, is that the majority, since we are a Christian nation, the majority of folks, I would say if you looked at total numbers, attend some sort of a church. Okay? How regularly and all that gets into the numbers, but the fact is that what I'm hearing through the pastoral grapevine is that more and more pastors, ministers, priests are shying away from getting involved at all as far as educating their folks in the different congregations about what's going on politically. So I guess my question is, maybe two separate questions, is what can we do to change that? Because if you took every church in every county and the people that are involved in those churches and could get them involved in doing what I believe as Americans and as Christians we should be doing, we could have a greater effect. But when you make it to Congress with the system that's in place, what is your plan on being able to change some of these? Obviously, government spending is a huge issue. I just heard last night that, what was it, last year, that there was millions of dollars that were spent on plane tickets that were never used, and the government never even bothered to try to get a refund for those unused plane tickets, although they were funded. Obviously, there's a lot of tension. What's your plan for attacking that and getting through the good old boy network that's already there?
Well, one of the good things that's happening across the country, more and more communities and districts are electing, and I hate to use the labels, but conservative-leaning representatives. More and more new faces are coming to these congressional elections that weren't necessarily the hand-picked one of some of the establishment leaders. And as a result, there's a growing number of men and women who are joining and this happens to be a Republican portion of the legislature, the U.S. Congress. I believe it's called the Republican Conference. It's led by Mike Pence. You know Mike Pence, very outspoken, conservative fiscally and socially and otherwise, man of deep faith, and their ranks are growing. Because you can obviously see, without question, let's just be honest, the Republican Party has struggled here in the last couple of years trying to figure out who it is. And part of the reason is for you, I thought your question was going to go a different direction. You said, okay, all you Republicans, there's a majority down here, why aren't we seeing something that at least looks Republican coming out of our United States Congress? Again, I guess this is on camera, so there may be some people that watch this that won't be tickled with this, but let's just have an honest conversation about this. Now, if you disagree, please let me know. I'd love to hear your side of it. But I've been involved in the party for some time. I was often, let's just back up. You know, there were many of the very leaders who now might tell you that I shouldn't be your congressman, that before were writing checks to my campaigns. They were the ones that would introduce me as a guy with the rising star of the Republican Party, and not just in Ashland, but in Stark County and otherwise. There was the one that everyone would tell me when they'd introduce me at Republican events how bright the future was. The place where the future started dimming was when they began to see, wait a second, he's not a loyal foot soldier that's going to get in line and do everything we want him to do. That's when no longer did I sparkle as much in some of those party leaders' eyes. That's it, plain and simple. This is what I have discovered. And I think you can take it to the bank. If you do your homework, you'll find out it is exactly so. Many of our current leaders in the Republican parties, whether it be at the state or federal level, are of the mindset that the only way you win a general election is if you provide a Republican candidate who is moderate to left-leaning at best. The thought being that's how you draw over some of those independents and that's how you can convert some of the Democrats in a general election, is if you put forward candidates that are middle of the road to left. After all, they think that we should be more quiet about the life issue. We should be more quiet about gay rights and so on. We need to be in the center. So you can take this to the bank. If the Republican Party gets behind a candidate in a primary, they are choosing a candidate that they believe is most moderate and most able to take a general election. Now you say, oh, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Like Gordon referred to, it wasn't long ago, probably the last 10 to 15 years, the Republicans occupied everything in the state of Ohio. The governor, lieutenant governor, all the statewide, the state house, the state senate. We even had a majority in the U.S. Congress and a president in the White House. Now, why is it that all of those conservative Lincoln Day speeches you heard, all those slick pieces of mail you got in your mailbox, bullet point by bullet point, every one of those core Republican values and conservative principles that you cherish outlined, why is it that Gordon can sit here today and say, so why isn't anything getting done that looks conservative or Republican? Why is it that we're spending more than ever before? We're adding a new benefit to Medicaid. We're doing all of these things. It's because it was one thing to say to speak a conservative principle at election time. It was another thing to achieve the position. Now we've got to hold on to the seat, and the way we do that is by moving to the center. Now let me ask you, if a Republican moves to the center, do you honestly expect Democrats to say, you know what, now I'm going to vote for the Republican because he's moved to the Democrat side? Do you expect a liberal to say, look at that conservative, he moved to the center, I'm going to go his direction now? No, they're going to sit there and clap with glee that we finally moved their direction. In the scheme of things, it are the conservatives that are always moving in the thinking that that's the way they will get votes. But what's so false about that is, how did you win the seat in the first place? By masquerading as a conservative. So perhaps if Republicans would have delivered when they held all these majorities and all these seats, we wouldn't have Obama in the White House. We wouldn't have John Bocheri as our congressman. Because voters would have been there saying, you did what we asked you to do, we're proud of you, and you can go back. But instead, now we have a situation where we're still speaking the same principles, the conservative principles as Republican candidates, but now the voters find themselves in a place where they have to decide whether they believe it. And that's much, our issues are right. Our biggest challenge is convincing men and women we can be trusted to deliver if they select us. And so that was a long answer to your question, but the reality is the growing number of men and women in this Republican conference, I think there's like 137, that's their whole, they're trying to move the party's leaders back to where we're supposed to be. And now they're getting such numbers that they're able to have more of an influence when it comes time for some of these issues. Now obviously they still don't have much if they're not the majority, but they can have a sway within our minority.